in terms of like the impact that I'll have will probably be greater than any of my entire history in my entire family, like going back generations. So I think there's something to be said about understanding who you are and loving who you are and then being authentic to it and then letting things unfold as they need to.
Welcome to Therapy is My Therapy, a podcast where licensed counselor Olivia and unlicensed client Tanya delve deep into real and raw conversations in order to demystify what really happens in that 50-minute hour. Heads up, this podcast contains strong language and sensitive topics related to mental health.
So today we have a remarkable guest and fellow survivor of the Sean Taylor alchemical process, Sach Latti. Based in BC, he's an athlete who's running across Canada in order to raise awareness for veteran mental health. Today, we're going to get into his mental health journey and the experience of growing up in an immigrant family and so much more. If you want to kick it off, Olivia?
Yeah, so we're really excited to have you. And if you want to just get started by giving us a background of what brought you here, what you want to talk about, what your experience has kind of been.
Sure. In a nutshell, 18 years law enforcement I've served. And over the last few years, I've went through a divorce and a few other things and started struggling with my mental health and had to find some ways to help myself. So started entering into that space of therapy but really the therapy, before therapy, it was like running. Started running, then fundraising, and then started raising awareness. And then a whole bunch of other things started unfolding. And here we are.
That's often what I hear with people when they realize like, they're starting to come to the realization that their mental health might not be where they want it to be. Usually the instinct is to go to something that's more accessible, like physical health, right? Because there is a connection between them. So what made you realize like, okay, running is not doing enough or it's not getting me to the place where I need to be? Like now it's time to do therapy. Was there like an inflection point?
No, I think it was therapy first.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah. So I was going through a divorce and I was the problem in that divorce, right? So I was the precipitating factor to initiate the divorce. And so for me, I was like, man, I have these behaviors that aren't really that great, but I'm not a bad person. Like that's kind of what I started just kind of reflecting on. And I was like, well, if I'm not a bad person, why am I doing all these stupid things? And why am I behaving poorly? So that's kind of what precipitated me going to see a psychologist. And, also I was struggling with like managing things because of all those things were happening. So, yeah, that's how it started.
It's really interesting that you had that perspective because I think a lot of times people develop this belief that they are just a bad person and they have a hard time separating it from, well, I did some bad things. So did you have experiences growing up or whether it was parents, role models, other kind of adult figures in your life that led to you having that belief? Or was it something that you feel like you've always just had?
Primarily for me, it was my dad. He always had really good sense of integrity because his father was a police officer. And he was a police officer in India 80 years ago, 60 years ago, whatever it was. So if corruption is bad now, it was probably even worse back then. My dad prided himself on his father never taking a bribe. So, there was that level of integrity. So my dad tried to instill that in both my brother and myself. But my dad had his own challenges as well. So it kind of manifested in a way that might not have been ideal. So, there was trauma or experiences in my childhood. But then there was also that other angle of good integrity, this, that, and the other. So it was kind of conflicted to a certain degree.
There were maybe things that you learned from that were not ideal. But the underlying value that stuck with you was, well, I'm capable of doing bad things, but if I do them, I'm going to take accountability for them. And it's not just that, it's something deep inside me that can't be changed. Because I think that's an issue a lot of times that I see where people will just view themselves as a bad person and say, well, therapy's not going to help me like I am who I am. So I think that's a really interesting viewpoint that I don't hear a lot. Usually people learn that as they go through therapy, but I don't hear that a lot of people coming into it with that level of awareness. And it's cool to hear how that came about for you.
So, yeah, I guess so. Like, I mean, it sometimes I guess you could say it's even more damaging, I suppose. Like knowing okay, I'm not a bad person. And then I know that thing, what I'm about to do is not good, but I'm doing it anyway. Right. So then it was like, man, why can't I break free of certain things? That's what took me some time to get to where I'm at now, because I had to unpack some stuff. And essentially, the pattern was addiction patterns, right? It may not have been like alcohol, or, well, it was from time to time, but like, let's say infidelity or whatever, right? Like all these types of things was, it sounds so weird now, but it was like seeking out dopamine hits so I could feel better about who I was. And like, well, pattern of addiction, I guess. It sounds so stupid or silly saying it now that I'm saying it out loud, right? Cheating on people or like doing things as like a addiction kind of thing, but it had an element of that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's the least weird thing I've ever heard. People view addiction as drugs and alcohol, but those are just the medical ones. People get addicted to or dependent on anything that can help keep them from having to deal with heavier things or numb them from whatever it is that's going on that feels too heavy. So those things like TV, exercise, work, shopping, food, sex, all of those things are very, very common. And they don't get the same level of awareness given to them because it's not necessarily a medical component to it, but it also is because everything's connected. And like you said, we get dopamine hits from things that feel really good and exciting and new. And especially with infidelity, if you're in a relationship for a long time, your brain is not doing the same thing that it did in the beginning. So it's really easy to get that sense of, oh, this new person is giving me this new feeling. I want to feel this way again, and I'm not feeling this where I am. That if you're not more aware of how that can happen and what is going on in your brain, it's really easy to get that confused and to end up getting stuck in that loop.
100%. And I was very confused, man. Like, it was almost like, for me, a lot of times, chasing those dopamine hits. So pretty much all day I was white knuckling all the time. All the time.
Yeah, it's so common, and it's something that I think happens a lot with our hobbies, where it's like, oh, well, I'm doing this thing that's really good for myself. But if you're doing it in a way that is so obsessive, you're probably then losing the heart of it, because now you're just doing it because your brain is telling you, like, I need this. It's not as much like, I love this. This feels good for me. And so I think that plays a role too, and how things get really muddled, because on the surface, it looks like it's good for you, right? Like, especially when it's things like exercise or work that people tell you, like, yes, you are a good person because you are moving your body and you're making money and you're being productive, that it's harder to notice when those things become problematic, because it's just like, oh, well, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Well, yeah. I mean, hence, working for 18 years in the same job and doing the things. And also, like, eventually I also got to a point within my career where I was like, oh man, I'm kind of done everything. Like, I've done all the things, and okay, I'm married, I have a kid. Okay, what do I do next? So I got to a point of disillusionment too, where I was like, man, okay, well, I got to do this for the next 50 years. What? Like, so then I started thinking, oh man, I'm just waiting to die now. And that's when I really started, like, not feeling pleasant.
I feel that story is very common among kids who grew up in an immigrant family, in the sense that I don't know how much your parents modeled rest ethic, because my parents modeled a crazy work ethic, right? But I wonder what your experience in seeing your folks enjoy the moment for what it is.
I don't think I ever saw them do that. We never went on really vacations. They worked a lot, man. Like, so Indo-Canadian, right? So my parents immigrated from India. Perhaps a little bit different story than some, but like, my dad left India when he was about 19, and he went to England and didn't speak English, and he was. I heard this story a bunch of times. He had never seen a white person before. Never saw a female in a dress before. Never saw snow, and he left India on December 25th and landed in England and saw snow for the first time. And at that time, what was it? It's 60 years ago, whatever. It was difficult for him to find a place to live because they wouldn't rent to him. And it was difficult for him to find a job because they wouldn't give him one. So, and he didn't speak English, right? So he ended up finding a job working a factory all night and eventually went to school. And then after he did that for 4 years, he graduated. And then eventually he got a scholarship to get his master's in engineering. So he went down that route. Eventually, the things I remembered, he was an executive within a telecommunication company. So there was a high stress too, right? So then he would be at work all day and then he'd come home and then his relaxation would be to have 2 or 3 drinks and then that would be the day. So there was really no like, exercise. There was no like, being in the moment. But what he and my mom would do for entertainment would either be have a drink or listen to music or have friends over and these types of things. So that's kind of what my upbringing was like in a small nutshell.
Yeah, because as you were talking about how you just wanted to chase the dopamine and just keep working and working and working away at things without pausing, that resonated a lot with me just because my parents never taught me how to just rest and be in that moment. And not only that, they rewarded me when I worked, right? They rarely were as effusive with their praise or their love when I was just being me. And especially when I was being a kid, I was being quote unquote difficult, where I wasn't wanting to work at the restaurant or I wasn't wanting to do all these things. And then they would apply a judgment. And I was wondering if that experience was similar.
It's funny you talk about restaurants. So when we moved to Dallas, we lived in Dallas while my dad was an engineer. And then at the time, he got laid off and then had to make a decision as to what to do. He had 2 kids that he just brought down to Dallas and then his wife wasn't working. And she was a senior executive and then he gets laid off and he was like, oh, shoot, what do I do now? So he bought a restaurant. So I can relate to the experience there. My dad had a couple things. He was like, okay, I want you to go to school and study. And then since we have this restaurant, you're going to kind of have to help out when you can, right? So I didn't go out at all in high school. I didn't date. I didn't go to my prom. I didn't do anything. And pretty much everyone else I knew did all the things. So as I reflect back now, that affected me a great deal in the sense of like, I didn't know how to be in a relationship. I didn't know how to talk to women. I didn't know how to like do anything. I lost my virginity when I was almost 20. So it was, I think, a lot of stunted development in certain areas that I didn't have. And I think that's in big part because of how I was raised.
So I was doing some research on you on other podcasts in preparation for this podcast, and you had said something really fascinating in regards to your dad loved you, but when it comes to parenting, love isn't enough in the sense that I believe you spoke about the role of a parent is to be someone who guides and prepares their child for life and the world at large. So I was wondering if you could explore that a little bit, because especially with immigrant families especially when they came up in a very difficult circumstance, they tend to focus on the basics. You have food, water, shelter, and my love, and that's more than I ever had. Therefore, that should be sufficient to make up for any and all shortcomings that I may have.
I knew without a doubt my parents loved me, and they still do. And I know their heart's in the right place. I know all of those things, and I have no resentment whatsoever for them. Having said that, the way I see parenting is a lot different, and I think they would look at it differently now too. Let's be fair, my dad pretty much ran the household to a certain degree, right? And not to say that my mom didn't have her input, but it was just they aligned and kind of just fit with whatever my dad was saying. That's kind of what would happen. He raised us with how he would function. So like, I'm pretty certain his dad didn't tell him he loved him every single day and did all the things because he was a pretty high ranking police officer in India, right? So like, not the squishiest type of person. But my dad was from time to time. Like my brother and I never lacked in him saying, I love you and all these types of things, either when he was sober or after a few drinks. So, we didn't suffer there. But I think he assumed that we would be just like he was in the sense that, okay, yeah, I can just do my thing and then my kids will be fine. I'll provide the house and that's it. They'll do all the things that I ask them to. But it didn't work out that way because it was also a fear-based household, right? So as I think of it now and reflect back, like living in a fear-based household doesn't allow someone to think freely, right? And you're almost just thinking about what to do just to continue moving rather than how do we explore my thoughts and do things and whatnot, right? So I've never really been free of thought up until 3 years ago. That's why I'm exploding like crazy now. It's the first time in my life that I'm like okay with how I think and okay with the ideas that come in my head because I'm expressing them a lot more now. And I wasn't able to express things freely as a kid, partially because of my parents and partially because of my brother. I had an older brother too, and he would beat the shit out of me too. So it's like now the first time I ever really felt like I had someone that I respected and then gave me space to think freely was with Sean. That's really where a lot of my authenticity started coming out.
That's the thing about, like you said, when you're in a home that you can't focus on expanding yourself or really exploring yourself because you have to just do the things that will help you survive, right? And you had that in multiple ways, it sounds like, of being an immigrant family, getting laid off, then, okay, well, I'm trying to help my family here, but now I don't get to be a kid. So you miss out on all those experiences. And you also, at the same time, in a more emotional sense, the house is being run in a way that is, I have to do this because I know the consequences if I don't. And that is going to impact so much more because you don't get the chance to develop your own thoughts and feelings of, well, here's how I would like things to be, or I wish we did this, or because when you start thinking that way, it makes it really hard to accept the reality of what you're in. So often what people find when they grow up in homes like that is then you get to your 20s and you're like, I don't really know what I believe. Do I share the same values as my parents? Do I think the same way they do? Would I want to parent the way that they did? And it's really hard to have those realizations because they're your family and you love them and you know they did the best they could. But when you start realizing, like, I don't know if I would do things the same way, or I don't know if I want to act this way as a parent or whatever else, it's a really hard shift to, like you said, learning like, oh, I can have my own thoughts and feelings. They don't have to be the same as my parents. And I have to figure out what those are and what I actually want for my life outside of what is expected of me or what other people assume I'll do. So I think that's something that I notice comes up a lot for people who grew up in childhoods where they're somewhat parentified, whether that's because of, being in a family that really couldn't afford to not have you help, or because of cultural differences or whatever else. There's 1,000 reasons why that can happen in childhoods. But I think that is a really common denominator for people who get to their adulthood and they're like, I have no idea who I am or what I actually think or feel. And this is not a good time to figure it out because everyone else did this in high school.
That was me, man. I'd say like for the main culprit, I think was just the cultural differences, man. Like trying to balance living in the West and then some of the Eastern sort of cultures. I mean, I had it a lot better than some other people for sure. My dad was the highest educated in his entire family at the time. And so that was a big deal. So my dad engaged with different people. And I didn't know that. So when I was living in Dallas, most of my parents' friends were like either doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs, like people with money. And then when I came to Vancouver, I was like, Punjabi people drive taxis? What? It was a culture shock for me.
So what was, you've been to India? Have you been there and like seen your parents' family and stuff like that? What was your experience like going there and seeing their background?
I didn't like it. I'm proud of where I come from. I'm proud of my background because I come from a family that's pretty legit in the sense of when you talk about like where you stand in the hierarchy of that area, our family is that. So like my dad's the second of 6 kids and he had an older brother and their 4 younger sisters. His older brother was in the military and he was an officer. He went to a school similar to West Point. So he became an officer. He retired as a colonel, I believe. And then my dad, he had an option of either going into military or policing or leave the country. And he's like, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else. So he left. And then his 4 sisters all married either entrepreneurs or senior officers. My grandfather was a high-ranking police officer. He received the police medal from the president. And my great-grandfather, he served in World War I, and he was served with distinction, and he received various medals. And to be an officer back then in the British Indian Army was unheard of. My great-uncle, he also retired as a senior officer, actually, in the Indian Army. And he was instrumental in creating military intelligence in India 50 years ago. So like we have a lot of people within our family that are a certain standard. So that was also something imposed upon my brother and I, is like, and we were out of all my grandparents' grandkids, my brother and I were the only boys, right? So then there was additional pressure on that. And so my dad felt that. He's like, oh man, if my kids don't do something, man, that's not good. So my brother went down music route. That wasn't good. My dad lost his shit. My dad said, you have to go to university. I don't care. Go to fucking university at least. And so my brother gave my dad a hard time and went into the music business, became very, very, very successful though. But having said that, my brother had that within him. He's like, fuck that, man. I'm going to crush this. So he was very successful in his space. And my parents were okay with it after. But that we had that like I remember when I was struggling in school, my dad was like, he used to hit me then. Like when I was like my early 20s, he'd try to hit me sometimes. And obviously I would never retaliate because I would crush him, but I would never hit him back. I remember like my dad said, because I wasn't doing good school, I was just really a hot mess. I couldn't put things together. I was drinking so much. My dad's like, I can't believe I had a son that isn't going to university. It was like a lot of this disappointment. It's like, and my parents have said to me before, I wish you were never born, things like that, like as an adult. So, those were happening at times when I wasn't doing well and my parents weren't doing well. So there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, it's so interesting too how internalized that generational like stuff is, that even though your dad chose not to follow the path, he still expected the two of you to follow it.
Yeah, I find there's this paradox when it comes to immigrant families, because like what you had just described, Olivia, the very thing that drove them to create a new and better life in another country, it's the very thing that drives them completely up the wall when it comes to their children. Yeah, my mom and I would butt heads constantly because I was as willful and individualistic as she is, but having that present in another human being that you're trying to corral into adulthood probably was really, really frustrating for her. So I just noticed that. And I just had a question for both of you, but I'd like to hear Olivia's more clinical take on it. Is what's the impact of having parents hinge all their hopes and dreams onto a child? Because that's the story of a lot of immigrant families where they're sacrificing and they're doing all these things to create a better life for their children. And they want their children to succeed and just have everything that they never have. But, that's a lot to put on a newborn baby. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to share your personal experience of that first, and then I can kind of give a clinical perspective.
There was always that feeling of like, yeah, I got to do something. So I felt like a loser most of my life because I didn't do anything. Yeah, I had, worked for CBSA and 18 years in law enforcement, but I mean, I felt like a loser most of my life because I felt like I never achieved. Probably there might be an element of that in terms of the level of conviction that I have now because I found what I want to do, right? Like I was doing things I never really wanted to do. To be honest, man, I didn't want to do law enforcement. I did it because it was just there. And I didn't really have that many other options because I didn't cultivate any. And, I got the job and it was like hitting a lottery. Got a job, got pension, got benefits. I'm a loser. So, this is a lottery, right? What's the big deal? I'm set now. But not really understanding the possibilities and the potential that we all have once we're able to like understand who we are. So as I'm living through my life, again, I only started feeling that way 3 years ago. And then now that I'm living what I want to do it's like, yeah, obviously I'm not a loser, man. I'm doing shit that most people aren't doing, and the likelihood of things turning out in a very, very positive way in the next few years is pretty good. And in terms of like the impact that I'll have, it'll probably be greater than any of my entire history and my entire family, like going back generations. So I think there's something to be said about understanding who you are and loving who you are, and then being authentic to it, and then letting things unfold as they need to.
Yeah. And that's generally, from a clinical standpoint, what happens is that when your parents have really high expectations on you, whether they're aware of it or not, if they want you or think that you should be a certain way, there's a sense of always feeling very split, because you naturally are going to want your parents to be proud of you. And also there's a natural biological pull to like living the life that you want to live. So it's really difficult for young adults specifically to make that choice, especially when you grow up in a home where there's so much pressure to be what they want you to be, or if it feels like your family's counting on you to be this way, or I didn't get to do this, so I want you to do it. And at that age, like for the most part, when we grow up, we're basing our world off of what our parents have taught us and shown us, because that's all you know. Like that is where your inner voice comes from. That's really hard to hear your own. So I think what often happens is that most people choose to just do what their parents want them to do. And then they get to that point of, I'm just here waiting to die because I did all these things that I was supposed to do. And maybe my parents are proud of me, maybe they're not, but I did what I was supposed to do and I feel like shit. And now I don't know what to do, because I've never really thought what I want for myself. I never thought that was an option, or I didn't think it was a feasible option. And I think we see that a lot in our society today, especially of like, okay, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you have children, you get the dog, like you do the whole thing. And then people get it and they're miserable. So I think it's something that happens even if your parents like don't put those things on you, but it's amplified when there is that high pressure. And then the alternative, right? Like it's not an easy choice. It's not like you can just be like, oh, great, my parents want me to do this. I don't care. I'm going to do whatever else that I want to do. Because then you don't have your parents' support, right? Like sometimes people will literally not financially or emotionally support you anymore if you choose not to go the way they want you to. And a lot of people don't have the resources to survive mentally, physically, financially without family. So it's like, it's a really hard thing, which is what leads to that feeling of I'm split, because it feels like no matter what you choose, you're going to lose something that's integral to who you are.
Yeah, and I came to that point and I had to be okay with doing certain things. And man, it's been a struggle the last 3-4 years, 100%. I've had to make some serious decisions, and it's been a struggle every single step of the way, creating boundaries, not talking to people, doing all these types of things. I have a question that came up in my head, though, that I want to fire back at Tanya. So you guys were mentioning proud and having your parents feel proud of you. I don't care anymore if my parents are proud of me. If they are, that's cool. But it doesn't really do much for me anymore. And it's almost like I've assigned that feeling to some people, other people now, not to them. Like, honestly, I think if Sean Taylor said to me, I'm proud of you, that would probably mean more to me than my parents. It most definitely would. And then I started thinking about that. Why is that? Like, I love my parents, but I don't know if I respect them to the level that I respect to Sean Taylor. And then I started thinking, why is that? Because I love my parents. Like, why wouldn't I respect them? And that sounds harsh, I know, but just speaking truthfully. And I respect who they are as people, but most of my life, they said things and they didn't do them. So what does that do for people over a period of time? I think it would just diminish respect and trust and things of that nature. And even if it's internally and not like, externally expressed. I think it ultimately comes to that. It's like, okay, well, if I don't respect what you're saying, then I don't really care if you're proud of me or not, right? Like, it's like, whatever. So anyway, that's kind of what I was thinking about. And I wanted to fire that at you. Do you have that feeling? Do you feel that same way? Is there, like, if your mom said, man, I'm really proud of you, would that feel amazing, or would it even matter?
I think when my mom says that, it comes with a mix of responses and emotions. There is like a glimmer of happiness in regards to that because for me, one of my deepest child wounds is the belief that I am not good enough or that I am unworthy, according to my parents. So there is a glimmer of that, but then immediately it's followed by well, you're about 30 years too fucking late for this, because it's that self-protective anger and also just an actual recognition of thank you for that now, but I needed that then. So there's still that kicking around. And then there's it doesn't mean much, but I say thank you. And it feels almost like if someone on the street had said that to me, I'd be like, thanks.
And this one maybe goes to you, Olivia, because you're the therapist here. Does that go to, like, maybe we're not exploring the feeling of feeling proud from our parents, and we're not diving deep into it to actually connect to it so that we actually feel that pride, we feel that emotion in the sense of like, oh, that is good, because we're shutting it off immediately because we hear it from our parents. We're like, oh, we're going to put that wall up and we walk away. It doesn't really mean anything. Or we're going to engage it and then we can actually feel it.
It's really interesting. And I think the first thing that I thought of when you were sharing the difference of when you actually feel it is that it sounds like with your parents, you had to play a certain role and maybe couldn't be fully yourself or wasn't able to be in touch with yourself until you stopped trying to make them proud. And so for me, at least, like when people who aren't living a life that I would want to live, meaning like not really aligned with the same values or not really authentic or in integrity, like their feedback doesn't really mean much to me. Whereas if somebody who is living in a way that I admire or respect, their feedback means a lot, especially if they're a person who knows me, like who doesn't just know the mask that I put on or the act or the role that I play. When they truly know me, then if they say they're proud of me, that means everything because I know that they're seeing me. But I think a lot of times it's like, well, my parents don't truly know me or they don't want me to be this way. So if they say they're proud of me, are they just proud of the fact that I'm performing for them, that I'm acting the way they want me to act? Because I'm going to take that as an insult, right? Like if I'm making people proud that I don't want to be like, then I'm like, I'm doing something wrong. So I think that's where, for me, there's a difference.
No, that makes a ton of sense. Now, another question for you, Tanya, because I want to see if we relate on this one. Every opportunity that your parents had, that if there was someone like a family or a friend that was your similar age doing better than you, would you compare to them all the time?
Oh my God. Oh boy.
Why
Yeah.
can't you be more like this person?
Yeah. It's very common in front of Chinese families where there'll be instances where, say, Olivia's mom and Olivia and my mom and myself, we run into each other. Olivia's mom will be like, oh, Tanya's so pretty. From what I've gathered, the customary response from my mom is to go, no, Tanya's ugly. Your daughter is pretty. So that was my entire life, especially with my cousin, with whom I had quite the rivalry with, but we buried the hatchet and learned that it was actually our parents pitting us against each other. And so long answer to a short question is, yeah, that happened all the time and definitely didn't affect me at all. No effect whatsoever.
It's brutal, man, because it's like, you're talking about like, oh yeah, this person's kid over here got this, thing, and they're good. Why can't you do that? Or how come you're not doing that? Because I don't like fucking chemistry. We're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, the whole athletic space wasn't a thing. Like I had to like really get into that on my own. My brother never, my parents nothing. Like it was, so I had a compelling draw or pull towards something fitness, and I didn't think we could turn it into anything other than just an activity or to train. But now you can, right?
They definitely had no idea that drawing things would make me money or taking photos or other quote unquote less useful pursuits that weren't being a doctor, lawyer, those sort of things. And I just had a funny story where I guess my mom felt inadequate in regards to someone's daughter in another Chinese family getting straight A's. You know, yelling at me didn't work, beating me didn't work, and then she tried bribing me. Yeah, it's a completely random tangent, but it just brought to mind of just the competitive nature that some families can have and what emphasis they put on, say, certain types of success or certain types of intelligence. They emphasize that while overlooking what innate abilities their kids may have. They think just because you're into athletics, that's not in my value system, therefore it cannot be in your value system, versus, oh, my son is very athletic, I should encourage this and cultivate it. And in cultivating that, he'll learn all sorts of different skills that will help him later in life. That circles back to something I had wanted to mention earlier in regards to the desire for you to succeed and have a better life than your family ever did. I was wondering what skills or tools that your parents imparted onto you in order to help you just become a successful person. You know, even if they wanted you to become a doctor or what have you, did they teach you anything or did they just yell at you?
No, they listen, they did their best and they never said be a doctor. They did say though, and this is true, and I believe I'll say this to my daughter too, is just they didn't back it up. They did say, doesn't matter what you are, just be the best version of yourself. Just do the best you can. But they said it, but I don't know if they truly meant it. But I mean, they, in comparison to other people and other Indians from that era and culture, they were very forward thinking. So maybe they weren't quite fully there with how they wanted to implement the, do your best. And as long as you're doing your best and you're happy, they tried that, but they just didn't quite understand how to do that properly, I think. I think that's where the disconnect. They never said, oh, you got to be a doctor, you got to be an engineer. Like my dad, because my dad had that experience. He became an engineer. He didn't want to be an engineer. His dad said, if you're going to go to leave, be a freaking engineer and get a master's. So my dad's entire life's purpose for 5 years, what kept him going, working full all night in a factory and then a university during the day, was that fact of getting that master's. And that was his entire purpose. And he was lost after that. He didn't know what to do. So he just kind of did his things and just followed whatever. He wanted to be an actor. I think he always had the right way of the thought process, but I don't think he quite understood how to do it, I think. And I hope that answers your question. Oh, one more thing. Also, another thing that I heard from you that you said was your mom would bribe you with $1,000. That might work if your motivating factor is money. But like some people's motivating factor isn't money, right?
Yeah, there's a whole mountain of work that I've had to do with my therapist in regards to, I began equating money as part of the transaction for affection. Long story short, she, after she would smack the shit out of my brother and me, she would take us shopping and buy us things as part of that cycle of abuse. And eventually I began equating, okay, this is the nature of our interactions now, is instead of love and care and time, it's money. Fine. There will be no long-term side effects from this either.
It's funny. So you mentioned that. You mentioned that as after my dad would beat the shit out of me, he would come back after and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I love you," though. Like it would just kind of make it better after. And I was like, "Fuck, man!" It's like don't feel good right now. Don't want to give you a hug.
Yeah. After they just kind of take out their emotions on you, they come back to you to put you in the position of putting their guilt away and of taking their guilt for them and their emotions and not leaving you very much time to actually be with yours. There's this dissonance of, okay, so she said she's sorry, so I guess everything's okay, ? When they obviously aren't.
It's confusing, man. I remember the last time my dad hit me, and I was a freaking adult. I was probably in my early 20s. I got plastered. I got blasted, hammered, right? And he saw me. I came home. I was living with him at the time. And then he smacked the shit out of me because I was hammered. like crazy. The next day, we were going somewhere and he was driving. And then I turned to him, I go, man, you put your hand on me again, and that's going to be the last time. It's not happening anymore. And since then, that was it. He felt pretty bad at the time, too. I think he had a few drinks in him when he did that. And then...
Yeah, the last time my mom stopped hitting me, I was probably 15. I mean, she's 80-something pounds, so eventually I grew bigger than her. And also, I was doing Muay Thai a lot at that time. So eventually, it's that moment where she realized, oh, this tool doesn't work anymore, because she just like smacked me in the arm. And I just remember like laughing at her and walking away. And then, yeah, the dynamic just got weird. But Olivia, I'm sure there's some clinical insight here to be had.
There's a lot there. Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thread that I'm seeing in all of this is it's really easy to say that you're going to do something, and it's really hard to follow through on it. And I think that's where a lot of parents go wrong, is that they say, well, I tell you that I love you. I tell you I'm happy with whatever you do with your life. But then it comes down to actually showing it with consistent action, and it's so much harder than they think. Because like, yeah, you can say, oh, I'm happy with whatever you do. And then if your kid says, I want to be an actor, and they have no plans of how to be financially stable, it's so much harder to just be like, oh my God, what are they going to do? They're going to be living in my basement forever. This is not what I wanted. Then all of a sudden it shifts to like, well, now this is not okay for you to do it. And same thing with like, well, I told them I love them, but then I hit them. And what that does to the child is it creates this association where, one, you don't believe anything anyone says. And two, you start to associate love with abuse or confusion or inconsistency. And that is then going to travel into all of your own relationships, where we come back full circle to how this all started, of you saying, well, I'm not a bad person. Why am I doing these bad things? And well, that's what you learned, right? Of like, well, I'm your parent and I love you and I want you to do what's best for you. But then I'm not actually going to prove that. And so that creates havoc on our adult lives when we then have to relearn what all of that means. And it's not a fun process.
Yeah, it takes a while. It takes the rest of your life, I think. I mean, I've been hard at it, and I know you've been at it, Tanya, for a while, and I've been at it for like a good 4 years, you know? And honestly, people would say this before, and I used to be like, yeah, horse shit. I'm kind of happy everything kind of unfolded as it did. I have perspective now. Everyone goes through things, man. It's like, it's not such an isolated thing. It's everyone. It's maybe certain degrees are different or whatever, but everyone's going through something. And it's good to explore these things, and it's good to kind of address them. Because, I mean, if anything, I mean, proof's in the pudding, man. I've been sorting things out for 3-4 years, and I'm not doing too bad now in terms of the direction that I'm going in, and I feel happy, and I'm in a relationship now, and I'm doing positive things, and I'm doing less negative things, right? So, I mean, things are moving in a really positive direction, and really, this is the first time in my entire life I've had a level of like peace, clarity. Like, I'm working all the time, and I have no issue with it. Like, I'm all the time thinking and doing. Whereas like before, I'd be working in law enforcement, you know, do 10-hour shifts and do another 6-7 hours overtime. You're there 17, 18 hours sometimes. And it was a grind all the time. It's like, man, I don't fucking want to do this. And I was a dog handler, right? Like I'm, you know, I remember the last few shifts when I was at work with my dog, and I was just hanging out with her. And I saw one of my partners, I was customs, right? So at the airport, and he's running around the carousels with his dog, and I'm just looking at him, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, man. I'm just like, I'm wasting my time here. It just hit me. I was like, I'm wasting my freaking time. I can do so much more if I'm gone. And that's kind of what started a lot of, well, not a lot, but some of the direction that I'm on now.
No, that's fantastic. And to circle back to Sean and why we respect him, it's because he lives in his integrity, and also that he has very clear boundaries. My parents were extremely strict, but also inconsistent, and also in regards to the abuse and the treatment, and you end up not believing them. And that lack of structure, it's terrifying for children. We don't want that, I imagine. But with Sean, I'm like, I know exactly how he feels about something. I know exactly where he stands. I know that when he tries to motivate me, it's for me rather than for his convenience. Or when he says praise that he's proud of me, he's not saying this for any other reason than he means it. It's as Olivia said, it's that he is exactly as advertised. His actions match his words. That's it. Yeah. And I just wanted to transition into the watershed moment where if you could just talk about what were the moments or moment that led up to you going, I need to change things.
Perfect segue into this part. It was meeting Sean. So I was struggling a great deal. And 18 years in law enforcement, I had like most of my friends of the last 18 years, at least when I was at work, wasn't really hanging out with them, not talking to them. I was really prickly. I was in a pretty bad state. So most of my friends didn't want to talk to me. And then, also I got divorced and they were friends. And so a lot of things were going on. And then November 7th, 2021, I had ran 100 kilometers from a town called Chilliwack to the Vancouver airport. And I ran that in under 15 hours and I raised a bunch of money, about $20,000 for a charity. And I thought I'd feel better after that. And that was the first sort of real big run I had done. I felt worse. I felt even worse. And I was like, man, why? I felt so alone. I felt so isolated. I felt so different than everybody else. I just ran 100K just on my own. And like none of my friends could understand, what are you doing? And like all this stuff. And I bumped into Sean Taylor's Instagram account a few months before that, November, through another mutual friend, Seb Lavoie. And I was like, who's this old guy hanging out with Seb? This old white guy is what I probably said to myself. And then I went to his Instagram account and I started tracking it. And I was like, and I know what JTF2 is. I know what Tier 1 is and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, wait a second. Let's see what's going on here. So we started communicating through Instagram a little bit here and there. And the reason why I connected, it wasn't so much about all like that operator stuff. Like, I don't really care about any of that stuff. I know a lot of people think it's sexy and cool. And for me, it's not, I never really cared about that kind of stuff. Shooting guns and all that. I was never that guy. But what I did know about those types of people is they were savage in their mindset and and they were outliers and they were different than other people. And I felt different than everybody else. I was like, man, I maybe I can relate to this guy. Maybe. So I hit him up, and in December of 2021, a couple months after I had run the 100 kilometers, Seb and Sean had flown to Haiti, and they were doing some consulting work there, and they had flown back. And Seb lives in the lower mainland of Vancouver, so he went home, and Sean's flight was canceled back to Rossland because of a snowstorm in the Vancouver area. And I just so happened to be at the airport at the time, finishing my shift, and Sean went into his stories and posted up saying, hey, anybody want to go out for a bite or whatever? So I hit him up and I was like, yeah, man, let's do it. So we met up, and the 30-minute conversation turned into 3 hours. We just hung out and just chatted. And I would say that's where the Gandalf enters in, the hero's journey, right? So after that 3-hour talk, I was like, hey, man, you cool with doing this again? He's like, yeah, if you think it'll help. I go, yeah, man, I think it's going to help. So for about 2 or 3 months, 4 or 5 times a week, we would Zoom call, sometimes almost every single day. And it was no time limit. Half an hour, 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever it was, we would just do it. And that's where a lot of changes and shifts started happening, because I started seeing things differently. He essentially performance coached me at where I was, helped me understand what kind of person I was, and helped me understand what I should be doing with my life. And then after about 2.5 months of talking with him, I sorted out my purpose and I got to work, and I haven't stopped since.
That's fantastic. And it leads me to another question. So you've had both a performance coach, essentially through Sean, and you've had therapy. What has the difference been for you? And Olivia, if you want to get into a bit about the differences as well.
I think for me, the performance coaching was what sped the process up. I think with just the psychologist alone, it would have probably taken longer because I couldn't see her every day. And another thing is I relate to Sean. My psychologist is cool. She's awesome. All the stuff. But it's still a bit of a difference, right? I'm a savage. I think certain things in my head. Even with my psychologist, sometimes I feel like I can't open up and say what's in my head. But with Sean, I know I'm safe. I can say some shit and it ain't going to matter. Right. And same with Seb. So I got two guys that I can lean on and be myself, and they're not going to shut me off. And in my past, I've had that. And not even too long ago, man, 2-3 months ago, I was talking to a friend and I was, going through a bit of a thing, and I was, just venting, and he stopped talking to me. And even though he's like, we could talk, save space. And after the conversation, and he's like, yeah, but feel free to give me a call whenever, I'm here for you. And I was like, bro, that ship is done. That's not happening again because of what you just said. So, it's hard. People say that I've encountered or been friends with, like, oh yeah, safe space, you can trust me, this, that, and the other. And over again, they haven't proven it. So for me, when someone proves that shit to me, I'm all in terms of that, because I've been burned so many times. Anyway, so I hope that answers the question. I went on a tangent again. I'm sorry.
No, that was great. Before Olivia jumps in with her take on it, I almost found that mine was the flip side of that, where I'm not sure what you mean by savage, and we don't have to get too, into the details. But I found there to be a different need fulfilled by therapy than speaking with Sean and Seb. And it may be just due to their skill set, right? Because there's some things that I feel that I may not be able to speak about as openly with friends who are in the performance coaching mindset than I can with my therapist, or it might be the dynamic that I have with my therapist, but I feel like I've said some real out-of-pocket, very intense stuff to her, and she, I believe, is able to just understand that it's part of my vernacular. That's how I speak and that's how I think.
Let me explore that a bit more, because I haven't really been asked that question. I haven't thought about it deep enough. So let me think about it a bit longer here. I love the support that my psychologist has given me. I do. But I think maybe there's a level of like, they're just friends, man. I want to be around friends. I don't need a psychologist if I have a couple really good friends that I can just talk to and then get shit and that can understand things. I think that's all I really need. And they've proven themselves to me, right? Like, I've leaned on them and they've supported like a ton of weight. And to answer your question, or to at least elaborate what I think a savage is, I mean, you're a savage too, right? So I think like extreme sort of ways of thinking. I have really, really lofty sort of imagination. And I'm only now getting used to embracing it. And I think that started with Sean. So for me, there's a connection there. I have a connection with those two guys over my psychologist because I pay her. Right? And I go see her once a month. And she does little tune-ups, right? And she supports, my work safe claim or these different things that are going on. So she's an integral part of my thing, but I wouldn't call her someone that I need to talk to someone right now to save something. Hey, what's going on, Seb? I need something right now. It's a different thing. For me, it's like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, I get emotional thinking about them. It's a different thing for me.
Yeah, they're my fairy godmothers, I like to call them.
Well, no, Sean saved my life, straight up, right? Like, so for me, that's a meaningful thing for me. And we've had lots of conversations, and I've kept my word with certain things, and I want to be able to make him proud, and I want to, these are all these different things that are attached to it that aren't attached to my psychologist. And I'm very fortunate and lucky to have met those two.
Yeah, those two have changed my life. Before we both end up crying and this becomes the Sean and Seb Love Fest. Olivia, I'd love to hear you weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing if you're getting something different from your therapist than your friends, right? Like, they're not supposed to be the same support. For different things in your life, you're going to require different support. And in a lot of ways, therapy is a way to learn what safety can look like and learn different skills so that you can go out in the world and have them in real relationships, because therapy is a relationship, but it's not a reciprocal one, right? Like, I'm getting things from you in the sense that I learned from everyone and everything, but it is not your job to give me anything, and it's not supposed to be. And that is not the same as a friendship or a relationship or anything else, where it's not just that someone else is giving something to you, it's that you can give it back to them. And you have that space that probably feels so much deeper because it can happen way more organically. And you also are getting them in return, right? Like as a therapist, my clients don't know me. They know me on a professional level. But when they say, this is this thing I'm going through, I'm not going to say, oh yeah, I went through that too, and here's my experience. And you're not going to get to that level of, we have seen the same things. We have this deeper level of a bond. It's more of, yes, I'm going to normalize and validate your experience, but not the way that when you sit with someone else who's also been through hell or had really similar feelings or experiences, like you can share that together. And it's not like one or the other. Right? Like if you don't have friends or connection or relationships, a therapist can't fix that for you. Right? Like we're human beings, we need connection. And same thing of there are things that a therapist can do for you that your friends can't because they're an objective person who is not in your day-to-day life. So like Tanya was saying, there might be some things that you can share in that space that you might not want to or wouldn't be able to share with friends without it turning into something else, right? There are times where you don't want someone to say, oh, I feel that way too, or I've been through that too. Like you just want to be able to have, this is my thing, and I can keep it contained in this hour space weekly or biweekly or monthly or whatever. And that's just mine. So I think it's totally normal and valid and a good thing that you're getting something different from both. But yeah, you can't replace friends and connection.
And I think for me, look, I'm going to see my psychologist until like just as long as I want. It's like just going to see him, get a massage or something, you know. She's great. And you're right. I don't want it to be the same relationship. Sometimes I want to bounce things off of her that have nothing to do with anything. And she's also she's got experience in sports psychology, so I can tap into a few things there too, right? So I look at her as a tool to help what I'm trying to do. Whereas Seb and Sean aren't tools. They're part of my life. They're like family, you know? So I think about them all the time. How do we do things together? How do we make things better? Like I'm having this big fundraising gala this weekend, and it's all for us, not for me. It's for all of our speakers to speak and be in an environment where we can showcase all these other amazing people, part of our group, to people that would never know who they are. We're doing that as a team, right? And we're going to do that in Toronto, and we're going to do that in Halifax, and we're going to do that a couple times this year. So this is how I look at things. This is my contribution to my friendship. I got to be able to bring something to the table, just like they've brought something to the table.
Yeah. And that's something too that like, because therapy is not reciprocal, you also need, as part of healing, to learn how to give and take with another person, especially if you grew up in a home where that was some way fucked up. So like having friends that you're like, I can give this thing to you and I can trust you with it and trust that you'll give back. That is something that is incredibly healing that can't be replicated the same way in a therapy space.
I feel like I have to give, man. I really feel like I have to. It's like there's not an option, man. I gotta give back. That's what's like. I'm doing this. I had a revelation over the last few days, like because I'm putting on this event, and we're gonna be taking these events across the country, essentially. And I was talking to another friend, Jason Sipkowicz. He does a podcast in Fort Francis. There, he was like, "Hey, man, I want to send some money to donate. I'll buy a ticket, but just to donate so that you can, someone else can go." And that's the community we're creating, man. Like the guy's not even going to show up. He wants to send some money and to pay for a ticket so someone else can come in instead of it. And, it's amazing to see these other people through this space that we're all working towards. We're all connecting together. And I feel like, now this might be a bit of a tangent on what we're talking about already, but I feel like that's what I'm here to do too, is to create things so that we can all come together, be that force multiplying effect where I had this conversation with Sean 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago. We're sitting there and talking, and I'm a hot mess, and we're talking about various different things. And I envisioned this Saturday what's happening with 9 speakers, TED Talk style, with a whole thing. I talked about it with him as just hey, we should do something like that. And like, I just said it. I didn't know if it was going to happen. That's the amazing thing about being able to like sort your stuff out and being able to process your things and having like-minded people around you, because you can achieve whatever the fuck you want, man. Like, it's crazy because I'm talking to people about this event and they didn't realize I'm taking it to Toronto and to Halifax. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah. And I don't know how I'm going to do it. I didn't know how I was going to do Saturday. I have this much money in my account. And 2 months ago, you know how much money I had in my account? This much. I'm still pulling off an event with over 120 people, 9 speakers, fully catered, all the 9, like everything. But we made it happen because of the support. And I think that's the special thing that I want to continue moving towards and cultivating, because in the next 2 or 3 years, that's the entire country. Like, we're going to be able to, I mean, this is very different off the topic, but I think it's important that I say this here, because this is the beginning steps of really what we're trying to do. All of us together, you, me, everybody in this space, in the next 5 years, we will change the country. And I think it's important that we all kind of internalize that. What does that mean to us? How do we want to do that? Because we can scale this. I'm just a dude who's going to run across Canada, but we have a whole bunch of other people that can actually come together and impact everyone here through that one thing.
Well, since we're wrapping up, was there anything that you wanted to make sure that we asked, or anything that like?
I'm open to whatever. Like I'm open to whatever. So I have nothing was on the agenda percolating.
Well, I mean, I guess if you want to just tell us more about what you are doing with your running, and if there's any things you want to share with us to tell people of resources or things like that, just so that we have a better understanding of what that looks like.
So I pretty much full-time, I volunteer for the Honor House Society. It's a charity that supports veterans and first responders and emergency personnel in uniform with occupational stress injuries and various other mental health issues, PTSD related. What we're doing is this year, I'm hosting a gala this Saturday with 9 speakers, all from the community that we kind of support, speaking on mental health issues and their perspectives on mental health and some of the strategies and tools that they've created to help those in attendance. So we're trying to provide tools for people in attendance that they can leave and actually implement right away. So that's what we're doing for this Saturday. And then also we're going to bring that to Toronto and Halifax, perhaps Montreal, we'll see. But why we're doing that is to raise that awareness, to raise the profile of some of these speakers, because I think everyone in the entire country needs to know who these people are, and to help pay for my initiatives. So this year I'll be running 60 kilometers a day for 52 days. Starting in June, consecutive days. I'll be doing most of that in the lower mainland of BC, but then we're going to fly to Edmonton, run from Edmonton to Calgary. And then we'll fly to Toronto and run from Toronto to Ottawa. And then we'll fly to Halifax and we'll run there. And then this will all be in lead up of next year, where I'm going to attempt to break the record for the fastest run across Canada. 7,300 kilometers in 66 days is approximately 110 kilometers a day, over 20,000 meters of vertical gain. And I'll be the first person of color to attempt to run across Canada, let alone trying to attempt to break the record. So there's a lot of things that are going on over the next couple of years that I think are super important and I think super timely. And I think my whole goal is to try to see how to galvanize the entire country around that for next year. So getting to work, making it happen.
And that concludes this episode of Therapy is My Therapy. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing so you never miss an update. Once again, thanks for tuning in. The content discussed on this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not act as a replacement for therapy. Although we may share tools that have worked for us and talk about symptoms that we've experienced, it is not meant to be used for diagnostic purposes and does not constitute medical advice.